This week we're looking at lessons, our chapters 9 and 10. And chapter 9 deals with organizing your speech, and chapter 10 deals with the outline. So let's start with chapter 9. Organization is critically important to your speech. It empowers your speech. In fact, organization and content are equal partners in your speech development. If a speech is poorly organized, even if the information you present is first-rate information, your audience is going to tune you out. If it seems like you're just haphazardly working your way through and saying things you remember to say and not quite sure where you're going next, listen, I'll watch it and grade you because I have to, but nobody else is going to watch it all the way through. It's not going to captivate their attention. It's not going to draw them in. It's certainly not going to convey your point, what you're trying to get across. So organization matters. There are several different ways you can organize your speech. And in some ways, giving a speech is like writing an essay, but there are other ways it's very different. An essay and a speech both have a clear beginning, an introduction. They both have a middle, a body where you make your points, and they both have an end and a conclusion. And so they're similar in those ways. But whenever you're giving a speech, audience members hear a speech one time. They don't typically, now in our mediated communication, someone could go back and listen to your speech multiple times. I do when I'm grading them. But the fact is that in a speech that's given in a live environment, face-to-face, or even in most mediated platforms, your audience isn't going to go back and watch the speech again. And so when you deliver a message, you're only going to get a chance to deliver it once, and your audience isn't going to be able to go back and review it. Whereas when you deliver a written message, your audience is going to read it, and they may review it. They may even stop and hold their place and go look up a word or a concept to get a better understanding of it. They can't do that while you're giving a speech. So speeches and essays are dramatically different in that regard. What that means is that the speaker has to use shorter sentences compared to the writer, because the speaker wants to make sure what they're saying is plain to the audience. They got to use words that an audience will understand. There's no time for somebody to go look up the words that are being said. They've got to use concepts the audience can grasp. It's a whole different guideline, a whole different paradigm than writing. Writers use headings and subheadings, and they'll write those out, and their audience is able to see those and helps guide them through the flow of a paper. But as a speaker, you don't get that same opportunity. You have to incorporate your writings and subheadings your headings and subheadings into the content of your speech. You have to somehow inform your audience that you're moving to your next point, that you're moving into your next area of topic of understanding. And you don't have just a heading or a subheading to accomplish that. The old adage will always be true. Tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them what you have told them. As a speaker, you have to follow that. Give a preview. Tell them what you're going to tell them. Then make your points. Tell them. Then go back and revisit and sum everything up. Tell them what you have told them. That formula acknowledges the principle of redundancy, the use of repetition to improve audience comprehension. You've got to do that as a speaker. A writer who is repetitive is going to turn off his audience. A speaker who is repetitive in the right way is going to draw his audience in and cause his ideas to stick in the mind of his audience. Now, in our culture, we're most familiar and comfortable with linear organizations of speeches. A speech has a linear format if it has main points that are directly related to a thesis statement, and then subpoints that relate to the main points. And there's a clear linear logic to the flow of your argument. When you're using a linear format, you develop ideas step by step. You rely on facts and data to support every point. And you link every main point and every subpoint back towards your thesis. Every main point is directly linked to the thesis. Every subpoint is directly linked to that main point. And so there's a definite flow, a linear flow to your thought process. There are 5 traditional or linear approaches to ordering material. The first is chronological, the second is spatial, the third is cause and effect, the fourth is problem solution, and the fifth is topical order. And you've already heard some of these in previous lectures, but we're going to go back over them. This is the chapter that really introduces them to you, and so we're going to revisit them for a little bit this afternoon. First of all, chronological order involves explaining to your audience members the order in which events happened. It's used to describe a series of sequential events. This is going to be most useful in informative speeches where you're trying to inform somebody. It may be a process speech where you're trying to tell how a process is done. You have process speech, maybe you're telling how to make the best peanut butter and jelly sandwich in the world. And there's a right process, there's an order to those steps in your mind, and you use a chronological order to get that across. A spatial order is used to describe the physical arrangements of objects in space. If you were to give a speech about the Urshan campus and you wanted to take someone on a verbal journey, a walkthrough of the campus, you would describe the campus in spatial terms. You would either start at the front or the back. You'd tell about the first building. You'd tell where the sanctuary is, where the lunchroom is, and how the dorms relate. They're on either side, and where the library is located. And you would describe these things in spatial terms. That's a spatial order. It's also used in informative speeches. Again, it depends on what you're trying to inform your audience of. The third is cause and effect order. Cause and effect order arranges the main points of the speech on the basis of the causes of a problem and the effects of the problem. And you can approach that in several different ways, or actually 2 different ways. You may talk about the cause first, then talk about the effects, or you may talk about the effects first, then talk about the cause. No matter which approach you take, all of your main points and subpoints are grouped under one or the other or both. You have some things that are cause and some things that are effect, and those are the points that you're making in your speech. It's a versatile platform for delivering a speech. It allows you to get a point across in both an informative speech, but also a persuasive speech. When you're trying to convince somebody, you're trying to persuade somebody to make a change, that cause and effect can be an effective tool to convey your persuasive speech. Another pattern is the pattern of problem solving. Problem solving involves identifying a significant problem, then describing the solution that will alleviate the problem. This is the kind of speech where you start with a rhetorical question. How can you get a better grade in speech class? And then you proceed to provide the information, the contextual information that provides the answer to that question. So by turning in your work on time, by paying attention to the instructions that are given, by doing things the way professor has asked you to do them. All of these are your main points. And then you're able to wrap it up and say, if you do all these things, then you will get a better grade in speech class. That's a problem and a solution. It's used in a persuasive speech where you're trying to persuade your audience to take a certain course of action. The fifth is the topical order. And the topical order highlights the natural divisions of a topic. It's used to identify natural clusters or subtopics in a speech topic. It can be used in any type of speech. The example I've given you, it appears in your book, and it's also on your study guide for the midterm, says that if a student was giving a speech on giving speeches, they may use an acronym like BRIEF. What that acronym does is, first of all, it gets across probably what is their main point. Keep it simple, keep it brief, but it also gives them a framework in which to topically address the art of speech making. They use the B to represent brainstorming. They use the R to represent research. They use the I to represent interpretation. They use the E to say that you need to energize your audience. They use the F to talk about finalizing your argument. That's a topical order. It's useful in almost any kind of speech, and it's a very popular organizational format. You're going to see a lot of that over the years.